media as well, replaying this on our media. But the Black is Back coalition is a coalition of organizations that has, black organizations that have come together to, generally speaking, to expose the war against African people in this country. The International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement is part of the Black is Back coalition, and the coalition put out a national and international call for statements to be made and press conferences to be organized around the situation with the African teenagers who were assaulted by the police in McKinney, Texas. And I think the statement is one that can help us understand the colonial conditions of African people, where we have no power of our own, and we are totally dominated by foreign and alien power. And we will open up the floor for a couple of questions after the statements. I'm going to read the statement, and then Penny Hess is going to be reading a statement from the African People's Solidarity Committee. We'll also be sending this statement out after the press conference. Some press might possibly, I know the Sentinel in Tampa said that they would print it after we send it to them. So this is the statement from the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. And the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations denounces the colonial police attack on African children at a pool party in the Dallas suburb of McKinney, Texas on Friday, June 5th. A video from the scene shows white McKinney cop Eric Casebolt brutally pulling 15-year-old Dejaria Becton on the ground, pinning her down and straddling her on the grass outside the pool in a violent assault with heavy sexual connotations. The crime of Becton and other African children at the party was their presence in an upscale, predominantly white neighborhood. Casebolt also pulled his gun and pointed it at African teens who courageously tried to come to Becton's aid. Yelling profanities at the children and chasing them, the physically abusive cop was joined by at least 9 other cops who terrorized the youth, handcuffed many, and forced them to sit or lay on the ground. The group of African children had also been physically attacked by white women who lived in the neighborhood where the pool party was taking place. Screaming racial slurs at the children, the women's actions exposed the complicity of many white people, including white women, in the colonial terror historically waged against African people. This blatant sexual violence against Becton brings up the history of sexual violence by white men against African women and girls throughout our forced enslavement and as colonial subjects inside the U.S. This attack is tied to the reality that countless African women have been raped, lynched, tortured, and terrorized by white men over the centuries, often in front of African children and men, and often with the complicity of white women. The Black is Back Coalition also recognizes that this assault on these African children is just the latest in an ongoing stream of colonial police violence, murder, and abuse of the African community. The number of African victims of terror and murder by the colonial police continues to grow at a rate of at least 2 a day in the U.S. From 7-year-old Ayanna Jones in Detroit, to 12-year-old Tamir Rice in Cleveland, to 18-year-old Mike Brown in Ferguson, to 43-year-old Eric Garner in Staten Island, to 92-year-old Katherine Johnson in Atlanta. The list goes on to such an extent that our children are riddled with fear and loathing at the sight of police. This is why the Black is Back Coalition has demanded black community control of the police. The BIBC recognizes that the police are an arm of the U.S. colonial state in a social system that was built on the enslavement of African people and the theft of our labor, resources, and freedom on land stolen from the indigenous people. On April 17th and 18th, the PIBC held a national conference in St. Louis, Missouri, drawing African participants from all over the U.S., many of whom had been victimized by police violence. The Conference launched the campaign for Black Community Control of Police, a campaign that was enthusiastically embraced by mothers and family members of victims of police violence and the African community at large. At that conference, BIBC recognized that the murders and assaults on the African community are not accidents due to the lack of police body cameras or a lack of training. BIBC recognized that this is a problem that can't be fixed by police review boards or diversionary government-sponsored discussions on race relations. Through Black Community Control of Police, the African community will be empowered to hire, fire, and determine the training of the police. The Black is Back Coalition makes the following demands: the immediate arrest of McKinney, cop Eric Casebolt, for sexual assault on 15-year-old Dejaria Becton. 2, indictment and arrest of all the cops involved in the attack on the children at the pool party in McKinney. Indictment and arrest of the white woman who assaulted the African children prior to the arrival of the police. And reparations to the families of all the children threatened and assaulted by police and the white citizens in this attack. So the bottom has the contact information for the Black is Back Coalition. You can be reached at blackisbackcoalition.org. So I want to again thank everybody for coming. I want to call up African People's Solidarity Committee Chairwoman Penny Hess. She'll be making a statement on the behalf of APSC.
I want to thank Chimurenga Waller for that and for inviting us from the African People's Solidarity Committee to be here today, to be able to join in this stand against one more brutal assault against the African community that's all too familiar, that we see in the news weekly, daily, in a struggle for the right of African people to have control over their lives and resources. As Chimurenga said, I am a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party by going into the white community to organize other white people like ourselves, to take a stand for reparations to African people and to join in solidarity with the right of African people to Black community control over the police, to control over their lives, to return their resources, and for the liberation of Africa and African people everywhere. And we unite with the demands of the Black is Back Coalition, and I think as we understand that the Black is Back Coalition is holding these press conferences not only all over the United States today, but in Moscow, in Sweden, in London, and all around the world, which is powerful to see the unity of Black is Back and peoples on the planet Earth to stop this colonial assault on African people and to support the struggle for justice. We unite with the demands that Chimurenga just read of the Black is Back Coalition for the indictment and arrest of the police in this attack. Indictment and arrest for sexual assault by this Casebolt cop against this teenager, and indictment of the white women who instigated this attack, and reparations to the African community. And we want to say that, first of all, we condemn this assault that started with an assault by white women against these teenagers in this community who came up and slapped some of the teenagers who yelled racial slurs at them, who told them to go back to Section 8 housing, who insulted them in every possible way. This was instigated by these white women, these mothers of white children in this neighborhood who came up when they saw Africans in a pool party having fun, no fights going on. You know, they slandered this in the media, as they always do, by saying this was caused by a fight. It was caused by an assault by white women on the Africans, and that has to be really clear. And they slapped them and everything else. So we call for the indictment and arrest of those white women in their complicity with the colonial state who called the police. Then the police came in, raising their guns, taking this child, Dejaria Becton, 15 years old, throwing her on the ground, pinning her down with his knee, and holding her down in as it says in the press release, in a sexualized assault on a young woman that is reminiscent of the history of this country in which white men assaulted, terrorized, raped African women and girls over the years with the complicity of white women all throughout that history. So we condemn that. We condemn the stance of the police, the sexual assault that we saw. We condemn raising the guns, handcuffing teenagers, often who just came out. And some of them, as it says, were just bystanders. They weren't even involved in it. Everybody around them creating a little martial law right in that neighborhood right there, because Africans were in a suburb that was supposed to be white and upper class. And this is hideous. And when we think about the history of colonial violence, the lynchings, and all that goes with that in this country, the relationship of white people to it, and the fact that, as that press release says, every day another African is killed, from little children to elderly adults are assaulted and killed by the police in our name as white people in this colonial assault on African people that we see in this country. So first of all, we stand for the right of the African community to black community control of police. They have absolute right to control who has the guns in their community, to hire, fire, and discipline the police in their community, to have this as an instance of power to the African community, power over their lives, and to end this colonial violence and colonial state that we see. And we unite with all of the other demands, and we call on reparations to the African community, not only from the state, not only from the police, not only from the government, not only from corporations, but from regular white people who have been complicit in this stand and complicit in this violence for the last 200 or 300 years inside the United States and around the world. So again, we want to express our unity. We want to call on white people to join the organization of the African People's Solidarity Committee called the Huru Solidarity Movement, that works under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, that goes around, builds the days in solidarity with African people and the white community all over this country, that raises resources for the work of the African People's Socialist Party, and takes a stand of reparations from the white community for the work of the African People's Socialist Party, the struggle for liberation of African people, and say Uhuru and justice and reparations for African people. Uhuru.
Yeah, I don't know if Uhuru News had any questions about the press statement by the BIP.
Not as yet.
I just wanted to reiterate that the video that was talked about in the press conference, You had a question?
Yeah, I have a question. I haven't got the full or the full picture of exactly what went on here. I saw some people tussling on the ground. I saw the police slaying the little girl down on the ground, this, that, and the other. But I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything about somebody slapped somebody or a white woman came up and slapped somebody would you elaborate on that, please? Because I mean that sounds mighty bold to me for nobody not to do nothing now. That's kind of weak. But go ahead.
Well, first of all, the person who videoed the assault, testified to that, and also other African children who were bystanders to this, or saw it happen. In other words, they were at the pool party, testify that these white mothers came up and attacked them first. And this was the so-called fight. The so-called fight where these white women attacked and Africans defending themselves. And in fact, I've seen where some demonstrators were calling for the arrest of this main white woman who instigated this. Her arrest. This is real. You can see it on the videos where these children are testifying to what happened.
Okay. They did video of that.
I don't know if they're gonna video it, but I know it's.
I think what you're looking at is the complicity of the press with the state. That's what we've been always saying, that the press carry out the work of the state.
Right.
So that the thing is, not only did they spin that and make it the way they wanted to make you see it, but the more you look at the picture with the police and his back with his foot on this woman, the more distorted it gets. You know, they're doing things with that picture so you don't see it as clearly when he was straddling her the whole bit.
Right.
You know, so it's not unusual that they would spin it. They do not want you to understand that these white women came out of the damn complex, went over to the kids and slapped the kid and tell them to go back to their section. They assaulted those kids. The children were not in their community. They were in a predominantly white community. McKinney is a upscale white community, and that's where the children were. They went to a pool party because one of the Africans lived in that community.
Oh, okay.
So they were surrounded by not only these white women, there were white men that came out and helped the police corral the children. They were acting, and the police didn't, no, it wasn't just standing. If you watch the video, you would see him actually physically getting involved to keep the children corralled. The children were at the mercy of this whole white mob community and the police. The whole white mob was against these children. Even the little brothers that came to the sisters' aid when they saw what was happening. The children tried to resist. The police, that's who the police pulled out the guns at. The brothers came because the police was straddling this child, and the child was hollering about her back. They came to assist, and it's similar to what happens during slavery when, you know, the police and the white man and the white slave owners comes to rape African women and the whole family, and the husband has to watch that going on. It's the same situation. It's an historic kind of situation.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what Gaida said about the white people actually involved in, if you look at that video, you'll see a sort of heavy-set white man doing like this. He's keeping the children from actually going there to help this sisters. So clearly the white community was involved in this, and that's where it started. The fact that these children, all these children were in this white upper class neighborhood, that was the crime that they are accused of, essentially. Nigeria Beckham was not charged with anything in this incident, by the way.
No.
And we still have to determine if they charged any of those people that they actually had on the ground, that they get on the ground and some handcuffed and sit on the curb. So I think it's important to note that this is not something unusual. It's just now starting to hit the press. But you can imagine that this is not the first time something like that has happened. It's not the first time in McKinney, I'm sure. And it's not the first time in this country. So I'm not shocked by it at all.
I just want to say one more thing on that, because I read that McKinney, which is a suburb of Dallas, Texas, is 80% white and 20% African, or maybe African and Mexican. So it's majority white, it's majority upper class. And it was saying, and I haven't had time to research this, that in this past year there were intense struggles with the African community against what it said 4 execution-style murders that happened there. That I don't know what role the police had in that, but it implied that they had some. And secondly, I read that after this happened in McKinney, most recently, the fence where the pool is, the fence to the pool, is covered with notes taped up there from white people saying thank you to the police. Thank you for doing what you did.
Some I see, I don't know, I saw one of the guys there who first came around. I don't know if it's a Mexican guy or was it white or whatever, when they came around. But the bottom line, they say he's whoever, I don't know if it's Mexican, he's a nigger lover. That's why they police draw his gun on me, you know, because I saw one of the guys show up.
Oh, you mean the children?
Yeah, the children, yeah, one of them looked kind of guy. But what I really want to know too, have we heard anything from our beloved black president, Barack Obama, about going?
Well, interestingly enough, to my knowledge, he hasn't made any public statements about the incident itself. But that makes sense that he wouldn't do that, because after the Baltimore uprisings, you know, he said that people were thugs and hoodlums. So, you know, that would be consistent if he were to do the same thing here. Go ahead, Jesse.
How would you respond to people who say that, you know, police officer resigned and police chief apologized, and the way that they're trying to spin it?
Well, I think that what we have to do is stay focused on the demand for black community control of the police. Because if one cop resigns, it's 10 to take his place to do the same thing. That's why we have to have black community control of the police, because you control the system, at least that part of the system that operates in the black community with guns. You control that part of the system. Then it takes out all of those subjective factors about, well, he likes black people, he doesn't like black people. We don't have to be waiting on one guy to resign and then say, well, that's victory. It's victory when we get black community control of police.
They might put a black chief policeman in that White House place, you know. You know how they put this appearance on, like we got one in St. Pete?
Right.
So that seems to be happening a lot too.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen in McKinney. I think that you would see essentially the same result that you see here with a black police chief who has essentially told somebody in a public meeting that he didn't come to the whorehouse because the white man who's the mayor told him not to do it. So that's par for the course for these guys who act as neo-colonial thugs in the African community. They don't see themselves as part of the community. They just carry out the line of white power and continue to carry out these attacks. If a black police chief had been in McKinney, the same thing would have happened. I think the same thing would have happened. That's why we need black community control of the police. If you ain't hired, fired, organizing the police in your community and training them, if you're not doing that, deconstructing that colonial relationship that the press release talked about, if you're not deconstructing that relationship, we're going to continue to have these attacks on black people, whether the police chief is black or white. Go ahead, please.
In the case of McKinney, an 80% white community, there's not going to be black control of the police.
Well, I think that, because I'm almost sure that everywhere where black people are, maybe it wouldn't be black community. By the way, black community control of the police is not going to look exactly the same everywhere. Because some places, for example, in St. Pete, the African community is very concentrated in one area of the so-called South Side, but it's only 20% of the of the total population in the city of St. Pete, as opposed to some place that, like Washington, D.C., there's almost half African, Atlanta, majority African population. I think you're going to see that whole thing look different depending on where it is. I don't know the actual demographics of McKinney, if it has what they would call an African community in McKinney. And we have to investigate that and see what it would look like in McKinney.
But this didn't happen in the black community.
No, it did not. However, when you have a system that controls the police in the black community, even setting up the training and setting up the protocols for the police, I can still see a situation where the police act a certain way once that relationship to the police is deconstructed. If black people don't have a colonial relationship with the police, where the police act as occupiers and we act as the occupied, I think you will see the police force in general act different. I don't think that it's going to be status quo. If we get black community control of the police, even the police who operate outside of the black community are not going to act the same. I'm convinced of that. Because it's the relationship to the police, our relationship to the police, that matters. Eric Garner, I understand where he got killed. That wasn't a black community either, where he got choked to death. But black people need control over the police, and that relationship to the police needs to be deconstructed, whether we're in a white community or in a black community.
What do you say to those who would mix up or think that black community control of the police would be a police review board or body cameras or anything like that? What would you say to those people?
Well, the press release talks specifically about body cameras and police review boards. I can speak with some level of authority about police review boards since I was on one for 3 years. And I can tell you with some assurance that a police review board has, certainly in the state of Florida and anywhere else that I know about in this country, they have no power at all. In the state of Florida, it only has an advisory role. It can only look at cases that have actually been completed by internal affairs. So you can go and scream bloody murder about the police murdering somebody, but it's only after internal affairs has made a decision, cleared the cops, or done whatever they're going to do, then a citizens police review board can then look at that information. In Florida, it's not even legal for them to see the information before the investigation is completed. So what kind of power is that? I was on a board for 3 years complaining that it had no power, while the other 19 people were baking cookies for the police. So, it has no power.
Were the other members of the police review board, were they Africans also, or what was the?
It was about 3/4 African.
Okay, so that's
about 3/4.
That's the majority.
Yeah.
And they were baking.
And the head of it was African, by the way.
Okay, and they were baking cookies also.
Well, and I was being facetious, not all of them,
Right,
but I would say that because it was an appointed board, appointed by the mayor, I think that they set up certain rules. For example, in the city of St. Pete, you cannot be appointed to a citizens police review board if you got a criminal record. But it has no power. What's the issue with that? It has no power. It can only advise the police. Police very seldom follow the recommendations even that they make. So those kind of powerless boards are not an answer to black community control of the police, or neither is body cameras, because I believe the imposition of body cameras is going to lead to more executions of black people being videoed, and then more exonerations of the police. That's what we're going to see. It's just going to happen to be on video. Jimmy, you want to say something?
I think the issue of the press is as much an issue for us as the police. The issue of the press and the general white population, I think, is as much an issue as the question of the police murder. And I wanted to bring that up because the press does not easily come to look at the kinds of questions that we're trying to raise. And the only time you see the media involved at all is when they've been forced to look at a question based on the response that has come, from our community. And if you look at what just happened in Texas, and you saw the participation of the white women who initiated the process and jumped on the young African woman, that was the starting point of the whole thing. I mean, some white woman comes and tells the Africans that you shouldn't be here, go back where you came from to your Section 8 homes and stuff like that. And then another white woman, then she slaps her, and then another white woman jumps on her. And this is what appears to have initiated the whole struggle there in Texas. Then when you look at the video and you see the police attacking Africans and the white people not just looking on, but just strolling through the process, and they were near participants, if anything, like cheering squads. And you've seen the responses of the white people there. I think it's important to say this because there's a way this whole issue of police violence against our community is being handled as if it were just an incident. wherever it happens. It was an incident in Cleveland. The guy had poor training, shouldn't have been on the police department anyway. It's an incident in New York. It's an incident in Ferguson. And almost every time you hear the same refrain. You hear the mayor who comes out and he doesn't know exactly what happened, but he doesn't like what he saw in the video, and he's going to look into it. And the same thing comes from the police chief, more or less in every instance. And almost every instance, the story is the same that says why they killed the person. Usually it's because they were always afraid for their lives. Usually the person had the hands where I couldn't see them. It looked like he put his hands under his shirt, so that's the basis of killing. So there's a common refrain here. And you and I are not the only ones who hear this. The police hear this as well. The media hear this. The media has heard it more often than you, because you don't know most of the times when it happened. Only the media knows, and they make the decisions about whether anybody else is going to know it or not. Just the other day, perhaps on yesterday or today, there was an article in the newspaper in this city that talks about how some woman was suing the police department because they had come to her house looking for someone. It turns out it's the wrong person they were looking for. This may have been a white woman, which may be one of the reasons we're having this discussion today. And that she was thrown to the ground, she was jailed, etc. And the police came back and said, well, yeah, it was the wrong place, it was the wrong house. The woman had the audacity to demand to see a warrant or something like that, and then they charged her with resisting arrest. So you got a situation where the police admits that it's the wrong house they went to, but they're going to charge this woman with resisting arrest anyway. And so this is the new police chief, Holloway, who, the Negro, who is supposed to be bringing such change here, the one who, if some of you remember, a reporter from one of the national news magazines came to see me because she had heard that Holloway was such an improvement on policing. He's bringing modern policing. It was going to be such a big difference. And so Holloway is talking to the media, explaining this, that whatever was, everybody was wrong. The cops were wrong, going to the wrong house. She was wrong, resisting, but we're going to get to the bottom of it, etc. This is the kind of nonsense that's happening. And what's clear is that the media is cooperating with the police department, and the media have a stake in maintaining the status quo, keeping the peace, and they don't want African people to be engaged in any kind of discussion that could rile people up, to get people interested in struggling against the police, against this city. So that's what we see here, and the reason that they were able to do this is because there's not enough action on the ground here around these kinds of questions that force them to have to. When the media show, it's because they are concerned that if they don't tell the story from their perspective, then we'll be telling the story and dominating the narrative. They come because they are aware that a whole lot of African people have an opinion about this question. And maybe in motion about this question, maybe be inclined to do something about this question, making an explanation about this question that's not controlled. So what they do is, like when there is a situation like a Mike Brown, or there is a situation like what happened in Texas, then they are put in a situation of having to report it, because if they don't report it, it's being reported by whomever it was that took that picture and sent it out all around, you know, the world. We talked to people in Russia on yesterday, and they had seen the video. So it's so then they have to step in and do cover it, because if they don't cover it, then what happens is the coverage of the people is the thing that dominates, and they cannot allow that to happen. That's why they have to jump in. That's why it's so important to have mass movements on the ground. So it's very clear that we are indeed helping to shape the narrative, shape the consciousness of the people. And so if the media wants to do anything with this, they're going to have to jump in on it. In terms of this whole question about body cameras, what many people don't know is, even as we're having this discussion about body cameras, they're also talking about the body cameras not necessarily being available to anybody. And they say it's a question of privacy, etc. So the cops may have body cameras, and they, just because they're wearing body cameras doesn't mean that you're going to see what happened on that body camera. They have to protect the privacy of the person, they have to protect the privacy of the cop. All of this has become a factor, and even legislation is being proposed in different states about how the body cameras, videos should not be accessible to the public. So they aren't doing anything that's going to open them up to true analysis, assessment, investigation from the people. They're going to maintain absolute control to the extent that they can over how this question is dealt with, how it's handled. And that's again the statement about the significance of what it is that we try to do here, the work we do. We don't have to be our own media, and whatever comes out of here, stuff that we have to post, we do have an ability to share it with people around the world. And there are other press conferences, as I'm sure you've been told, that's either happening today or tomorrow in various places around the world. I think there's one in Washington, D.C. Yes?
Yeah, I just got a call from the one in Ferguson. St. Louis. She said they only send a photographer. They only send a camera person.
Camera person in Ferguson.
Yes.
Yeah, Ferguson, Missouri. And so there's no telling. I mean, I know that on today, is it tomorrow, in Moscow, in Russia, there's going to be an event. And I understand that various international media may be participating or covering that. In D.C. Today there's a press conference. In Oakland, California tomorrow, there's a press conference. Oakland is today, there's a press conference. Remember, Oakland, we're 3 hours ahead of Oakland. And where else did I not mention? In London, is it today in London? In Stockholm, Sweden, there's a press conference around the same question with more or less the same message. And I think, let me just say this. No nation of people can continue to have the kinds of offenses committed against us with impunity and maintain any kind of integrity as a nation. It's impossible to see young men choked to death by police in public view, children gunned down, 12 years old by police, 7 years old by police, 18 years old by police, and to see the kind of thing that happened to that young girl. It's a hell of a statement that's being made about the integrity of a nation that will allow this kind of thing to happen to us over and over again with impunity, with no meaningful response. And when I say impunity, I'm not simply even talking about a demonstration. When I see what happened to that child, that girl, I know that somebody was supposed to be shot at minimum. And I'm not saying this for the purpose of trying to get some kind of emotion. What do you call it? Figure of speech when you're hyperbole is not my purpose here. I truly believe that. I truly believe that when someone, these thugs, it's not just some thugs. It's just a response. It's just a continuation of a situation that we have been introduced to as a people in captivity, and where the most horrible offenses have been committed against us under the law, where white people and the government have committed horrible offenses. And what they did to that child, 14, 15 years old, to that child. I'm really glad that one of the sisters who from the Black is Black Coalition, the vice chair, say, hey, this is like a sexual assault. And I wouldn't have necessarily seen that myself, but I think it's continual. It's the kind of thing, I mean, I know of our history where white men have literally come to the house of families, and then actually gone in and forced a Negro to sit on the porch while he goes in and sleep with his wife. And that this whole thing of white men raping African women and children, sometimes in full view of their husbands and their neighbors and things like this, this is a part of that same tradition. And for us to handle this as though it's just some incident, it's outrageous. That the African community has to have a different stance. That's where we have to get organized. I'm not calling for anybody to go out and shoot cops and stuff like that. I won't stand in anybody's way if they should do that, but that's not the call. That's not the call I'm making. I won't try to stop anybody. You won't see me sticking out a leg to clip them, on the way to it or anything like that, But the point is that we have to get organized and be able to pay a consequence, because if they don't have to pay a consequence, well, it's clear to us that they'll keep doing it. And what we're looking at today is not new. The only thing that's new in this recent period is that it's been pushed to the surface by the resistance of the people after the Mike Brown incident on August 9th of last year. So we have to organize, we have to take this on, and we're in a contest, not just with the government, not just with the state, but in our own communities. Because there's a politic in our communities that says to us that, and tell the people, that we're going to integrate one day and everybody just love everybody, and that resistance, that it doesn't make sense to resist and fight back. And find and achieve a certain kind of receive accolades from the government, from the media, and other forces, because that's all they do, is tell African people to suffer peacefully, to take it, and one day things are going to get better. We're going to have to fight our way out of this. That's the only thing. I just wanted to say that. And also, I just wanted to add to this, the reality. If what you do, those of you who have access to this discussion, is anytime you see something like this happen, go to the internet and find the story online. Find the story on a local newspaper where it happened. Go and find McKinney, Texas. See what, I don't know what media, Dallas and what have you, right? Go to the internet and then read the letters that are sent in by white people about what happened. And that helps you to understand that we're not dealing with just some rogue cops and what have you. We're dealing with a dirty, dirty colonial situation where there are colonizers and there are colonized. And the colonizers enjoy this relationship, and sometimes it gets very vicious and nasty in terms of their expressions of the hatred they have for the colonized. And I believe anyway, that's another story. I'm not going to get into some kind of psycho analysis of this. But I just felt like it's really important for us to recognize that the media works hand in glove with the police. And I think that we have to constantly be aware and take the covers off this notion that somehow the media is just this innocent observer, this, what is it called, the fourth estate or something like that, that is there to challenge the police and or the government and expose it. That's nonsense. There is no such thing as an innocent reporter. The reality is that what we are confronted with is another corporation. It's a corporation that's no different from General Motors, no different from any other major corporation that we're dealing with. And like General Motors, the media, the corporations associated with the media involved in all the time protecting this system. Anyway, yeah.
So if there are no other questions, then we're going to close out the press conference. Is there any other? All right, I want to express appreciation for everybody that came out. We're going to close out the press conference. Please watch Uhuru News. We'll be putting some stuff up on Uhuru News, and I'm sure the press release as well will be available for people to look at. Uhuru.